There we go. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of our frequent flyers, as well as those who are very new to us. We are happy to have you. Good morning to you, Lori. How are you?
Hello there, Lauren, and hello to everybody. Lauren and I was just talking, actually, I was instigating the conversation about being so ready for a break. Is it the holidays and time off? So you can say in the chat, is anybody other than me like over it already and ready for some time off? Or is it just me? But luckily today, which we're going to get into, we got a fabulous, exciting guest that's going to just uplift. Oh, look at absolutely. Okay. I'm feeling the love, Lauren. So
Yep.
I was telling somebody yesterday, I go, do you know, if I was to put an emotion on my day, I would say perturbed, but I have absolutely nothing to even be perturbed about. But I have a low level perturbed in me today. And then it was like last night, I was like, perturbed equals Lori needs some time off. Because that when I get that low level perturbed, I'm like, okay, I know I need a time out. So I'm going to take a time out later this afternoon already.
Good for you.
But
Look,
I'm gonna let you get going here, Lauren. But look at everybody in the chat. They're like, "Oh yeah, so ready." Everybody's right there on the same page with me. Well, we're all gonna bring our energy together, and we're gonna sparkle. Okay.
well, with that said, let me throw some energy into our introduction for those of you who are new with us. We are from the SBDC. Now, the SBDC is a national program with over 1,000 locations across the country, and we offer no-cost services to local small businesses. Now, our services are at no cost to you because your tax dollars have already taken care of all of our fees. For the Los Angeles Regional Network, take a look at this slide in front of you. You'll see there's a map. We have physical center locations in Santa Clarita, correct? Camarillo, that was what I meant to say first. So Camarillo, Santa Clarita, over to Pasadena, out to Laverne, that's that waymark near Ontario, throughout Los Angeles, the South Bay, down into Long Beach. Here's a deep dive into what it is that we offer. So you get in contact with one of those physical center locations, and which would be that you'd get connected with the center that's closest to you, closest to your business. Once you get connected, you're able to be connected with all of our resources. That includes fantastic, I'm talking about incredibly intelligent and just knowledgeable business advisors. And we have advisors who have various expertise, whether it be taxes and finance, whether you are just starting out and looking to create a business plan, if you are looking to do a market analysis, if you're looking to raise capital, we have a specific group called the ACT team, the Access to Capital team. Lori's a part of that team that can assist you with capital. Honestly, whatever you can think of, we have resources for you. You might even, if you're like me and numbers can be a little scary. I used to be that way, but now after working with Lori, not so much anymore. Numbers are my friend and numbers are your friend. And you'll find that out when you are able to get paired with our guru of numbers, Miss Lori Williams. Aside from that, you are also able to partake in virtual trainings. Now, those trainings aren't exactly this show, but kind of similar in that they are comprehensive workshops that assist you in beginning your business, adapting and or growing your business. So please be sure to get in contact with us. If you are in our service area, so that means the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, or Ventura counties, please be sure to call 866-588-7232, or you can go online. That's going to be smallbizla.org/new client. If you are outside of our service area, that means that your business resides outside of the Los Angeles, Santa Barbara, or Ventura counties. Please go to americassbdc.org/find your SBDC. With that, Lori, I'm going to stop my screen share. Quick housekeeping. Let's be sure to put all questions into the Q&A, everyone. Please, questions in the Q&A. That way we can ensure Lori sees it and can address it. And keep those questions on topic. If you have any questions that are completely off topic or you want to be able to sit and chat with Lori or have a session with her, I'll have information in the chat for you to take a look at. I think, Lori, that covers it.
Yeah,
I
and
think
you know
that
what else
covers
I
it.
was going to mention too, Lauren? Wasn't it interesting last week with David? You know, I felt like I learned a lot with the SEP IRA. I'm gonna to have him back on because I noticed the chat was going crazy. That was
Yes,
a really good topic to cover.
it
So I'm
was.
really happy I had him on the show. It turned out a lot better than I even anticipated. So I thought I'd mention that as well. Um, well, anyway, for getting started on today, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Mythbuster that I've gone over several times. I know you frequent flyers are like, Lori, I know. But literally in the last week, I've had 4 people that have gotten themselves into a little bit of regulation issue because they're not aware of this. So I'm going to go over these things again. So I'm referring to if you are incorporated, it could be an LLC, an S corp, a C corp, but in other words, not a sole prop, not a sole prop. You know, a lot of times what happens is people create these LLCs, they do not do anything with them, and they figure, okay, they just closed on their own. And I keep bringing up to you guys, no, you have to go through a paper process. It's called dissolution forms, and you have to dissolve the LLC. What happens is that the LLC, the other structures do, but I see this more commonly with LLCs. The LLCs have the franchise tax fee of 800 minimum. So what happens is people don't pay that tax fee. The structure then is turned inactive by the franchise tax board. Then what happens is, even though it's inactive, it's still existing. So you continue to have additional fees as well as penalties attached to that money. Now, here's the catch. You can't dissolve the company until the fees are paid. So you got to pay the fees to dissolve the company. If you don't dissolve the company, you get more fees. You see what happens there? It causes great problems. Now, I've seen several people, it seems like we got a lot of moving going on, people moving in California, out of California. So I've seen people come from other states where they didn't realize they had to dissolve the corporation in another state. They came to California, they started a new company, or they just say, well, I moved my company to the other state. They didn't fill out the foreign entity doing business in California. So if you, let's say I'm in Montana and I set up a corporation in Montana. Then I moved to California. I have 2 choices. I either dissolve the one in Montana and fill out foreign entity doing business in California, which really, if California is going to be my residence, it doesn't make a lot of sense because then I got tax returns in 2 states, etc. The better choice is to often dissolve the corporation in the state you came from and create a corporation in California. So you don't just move the company, you have to register or do a foreign entity depending on what your choices are. So companies are registered by state, they don't move. Think of it kind of like a driver's license. You wouldn't say, I moved my Montana driver's license to California. You dissolve in driver license terms and then you get a new driver's license. So you have to really understand how that works. Now, EINs are confusing to people as well. An EIN is a nut tax number, basically, that's given by the IRS to corporations because they're separate entities. But you also, if you're a sole prop, you could have an EIN. Now, here's the catch. I just told you all about, you got to dissolve the company, got to dissolve the company. EINs are not dissolved and they're not made inactive, right? So the IRS, hands them out, hands them all out there, right? And then if the company's dissolved, you just do not use that EIN. So you can't say, well, I'm going to keep this EIN and use it for other things. No, it's connected to that corporation, that sole prop. If you do that on your tax returns, you're going to cause a lot of confusion, and the IRS is going to be looking for a tax return for another company and getting that one instead. So literally, when the company's not in existence, the EIN just is nothing. You don't have to do anything. You just do not use it. And if you're a sole prop, and this is why I say it's such a good idea to be a sole prop if there's not a legal reason to be incorporated, you literally are just doing business when you do transactions. Now, I didn't say just revenue, any transactions. So if you had transactions that year, you fill out a Schedule C. You can use the EIN if you have one. You didn't have transactions that next year, you don't fill out a Schedule C. That's why they're a good idea to go forth. And the concept that's big in Los Angeles, I got an idea, I'm going to get an LLC. That's not a good idea to do. Really understand. And I'm having my legal entity webinar one last time before the end of the year if anybody has any questions on what I just said. Speaking of which, here's my upcoming schedule. And as far as the financial literacy series, debating whether I'm going to do one in December. It may wait until January, but I'll start them again in January. But session 2 and session 3, if you miss session 1, no worries. You can jump in session 2 and session 3. That's where I go through the Excel documents and I show you how to create your own customized model to identify and monitor your profitability. And then there's my legal structure for and tax advantages. And I didn't update my calendar this day. I noticed, so November 1st is gone. November 8th on time, but November 15th next week, we got Clarissa Wilson on for Nerdy Numbers. We're going to talk about QuickBooks and reconciling and the things you need to do before year end. I'm going to have another person coming on and talking about accounting this month. I'm also going to have the conversations of AI coming up. I'll have that calendar updated for next week, but we got a lot of interesting shows before the end of the year. Before I get my official holiday that I want to take right now, right? I got to wait. So with that, though, I am pretty excited about today's show. Now, if you are a frequent flyer, you will be familiar with our guest because I think we've got 3 times going on here, if I'm not mistaken. So let me tell you about our next guest. Elianne Rodriguez is a serial entrepreneur with 17 years of experience in small businesses, education, and tech. She believes entrepreneurship and technology are great disruptors to build accessible and equitable ecosystems. Elianne is currently LEEAF's director at Cal State LA, a small business advisor for the LA SBDC network, and managing partner at List Ventures. I have to read this to you guys. It's pretty impressive. Her experience leading community projects has served 5,000 plus clients, launched 100 plus businesses, supported 12,000 plus jobs, and assessed over 40 million in capital. And Elianne also serves on several advisory boards of grassroots organizations, small business collaboratives, educational institutions, and tech advocacy groups. Welcome, welcome to the show, Elianne.
Thanks, Lori.
Oh my God, I'm exhausted just reading your bio.
Yeah,
I was thinking your numbers are probably no longer correct. You've added a lot to those numbers.
This year, yeah, I was just thinking that as you were reading off the numbers, and we just completed our 2nd year at LEEAF, and we have our impact report. So I have to update now that that number, because that access and resources have grown. So.
Oh, I know. So let's start out. And I wanted to read all that because, guys, we're going to have a very, very fun discussion today. We're going to kind of be talking about what's going on out there. That's going to be our topic. But before we get started, tell people about LEEAF and some of your programs and how you got started as an entrepreneur, because it's a fascinating story as well. Literally, when I think of entrepreneurship and support, I think of you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, I not knowingly was engaging in a lot of business support work and entrepreneurship from a very, very early age, right? I grew up in a restaurant with my parents. I have my entire family is really entrepreneurial, right? My uncle had a stand at the swap meet. We had a lot of family members that had like small businesses. I think for us, entrepreneurship was more of a necessity, much more than something that we were like, oh yeah, we want to be entrepreneurs. It was more out of necessity, out of the need to survive as we came into this country as immigrants, right? I think that's probably the story of a lot of LA folks. And so yeah, I started in that. I actually worked in a lot of small businesses from the age of 17 until, not too long ago. I worked in different industries. I worked in, food and beverage. I worked in medical. I worked in, retail. I essentially was just trying to, I had a lot of part-time jobs, making full-time salary, right? And like making the money that I needed for my daily, for my daily life. And I think I decided to go back to college because I was like, I've been working in businesses, helped a couple of restaurants open up. I actually worked with a serial restaurateur and flipped restaurants for 2 years with him. Learned a lot on the job, but I was like, I should probably get a degree and actually see what the the theory behind all of this stuff is, right? So I went back to Pasadena City College and then transferred to Cal State LA, where I got involved in a lot of the tech industry. I got introduced to the startup world. I got introduced to the tech ecosystem that was booming at the time in downtown LA. And so, I just started kind of navigating that space and found myself getting my first corporate job actually as a program coordinator for one of the SBDCs. I was actually, doing intakes, talking to customers, talking to clients and learning, the ins and outs of what clients needed. And eventually was I realized as I was talking to a lot of business owners who were calling and asking, for support at the SBDC, I was like, wow, I actually know quite a bit of things because I've worked in a lot of different industries and a lot of different businesses, and started to realize this is what I've been, what I've been kind of chosen to do, and just kind of rise from being a coordinator to, an interim director, and eventually just had a lot of ideas as to how to better support businesses, right? So I transitioned into this LEEAF directorship, a couple years ago, especially, coming out of the pandemic in 2021. And essentially we set out a goal to create, an accelerator that was focusing on BIPOC women. So during the pandemic, we saw a lot of women of color starting businesses, picking up Etsy gigs, right? Building, doing things in their house and selling stuff so they could make a little bit of extra money. And we saw just a booming opportunity. So decided to create an accelerator, and always had the idea of, when I went to college, I obviously went to business school and created a lot of deliverables for fake companies, right? They had me do a fake business plan. They had me do a fake marketing plan. They had me do, they had me start a fake Instagram account and grow it, right? So I could learn marketing. And I thought, why am I doing fake profiles when I could be helping an actual small business, building a business plan and building, marketing plan. So with that in mind, we decided to pair up the accelerator with a fellowship that is actually for students, for Cal State LA students, and specifically focus on non-business students who I believe need the entrepreneurial and business skills to develop in their careers, right? I think entrepreneurship and business is not just for those that are looking to start business, but whether you're working at a job or, if you're an artist and selling your own paintings or selling your, or if you're selling your music, all of these entrepreneurial and business skills come in really handy to understand how you should be operating, right? And how you should be working. So that's kind of how I got started. And I've been really fortunate and really lucky to run into people that are always super excited and gung-ho about my crazy ideas. Because I like I said, with this project at LEEAF, it was a conversation I had with one professor where I was like, if I had $1 million, I would run a program like this. And 3 years later, the opportunity came about, and they were like, that crazy idea we were talking about during lunch, at Cal State LA 3 years ago. So there's an opportunity for $1 million, and we applied for the grant. And then when we got the grant, they were like, so now you have to actually build it. And I was like, no. I was just kidding. It was just an idea. I was dreaming, right? Even in the pandemic, writing the grant, I was like, I don't, what, right? Who's going to give us $1 million? This is crazy. And then, we just we got it. We're here. And every day since then, it's been just kind of dreaming about different pathways and resources and opportunities for entrepreneurs. Now that we're working again, in person, and we're talking to businesses every day, we're out canvassing and visiting businesses that and business corridors that have been affected by the pandemic. We're starting to see what are some of the needs. And I'm happy to say that I think I've figured out, or I've tapped into my, my magic powers of just building. I like building things that don't exist. I like building ideas, dreams, pathways for what most people think it's impossible, for what I think a lot of our institutions that we work with think that's crazy. How would we ever do that, right? Or like we don't have the capacity, or we don't have the reach. And my my magic line is always, we don't have the capacity or the reach yet.
Yeah,
How do we build that?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do we build that?
Yeah. You know, there were so many things that you said that will leapfrog as we go into the dialogue. But, you know, being some years older than you, what I found interesting through the progression of my career is that I was at the age where the thing to do was you got a corporate job and you stayed in that corporate job forever, right? But that was not where my spirit was born. I was physically born in that era, but my spirit was not of that era, right? So I was always at odds, starting my own company, saying I was a fool, I didn't have benefits. But I love the concept of being able to dream and create and see everything out there. Well, it's so funny because you know how, like, if you're younger and somebody says you can't do something and they pick on you, and then all of a sudden that thing becomes the way life is, and you go, so there. Yeah. I think that's kind of where we're at, where really the success and the future, I'm not a crystal ball reader, but my sense is the future is about these local companies doing their creative thing and interacting with each other. And maybe we're no longer about big institutions anymore. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that people humans need to be creative. They need to be imaginative. They need to feel engaged. And this kind of lifestyle offers that. So in another thing that you mentioned about the different, you know, like the Etsy gigs, I like that during the pandemic. I think that also, and I'm going to let you then take from everything I said here, Elaine, I believe, this is my personal belief, we're not going back to anything that once was. I think that the pandemic was a game changer, whether it's still existent or over. I'm not even concerned about that. What I'm saying is the consumer, the way we purchase, the way we think about work, the way we think about a work week, the way we think about things like us talking on Zoom, all of the behaviors have created a new foundation. And I think the opportunity for companies is changing as well. So, Elaine, you are out there. I want the audience to know she is not kidding, man. She's in every group, every association. This woman is on her feet, on the street, everywhere. So you see a lot what's going on. So why don't you get us started with, you know, what of what I said, does any of it resonate with you? And what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I agreed, right? Like I think previous, prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of, there was still a lot of movement in terms of jobs, right? Like folks were, I think staying like 5-6 years, but we were starting to embark in this journey of like a 2-year trend, right? Like you stay in jobs for 2 years and you move up or you move out. And I think now it's changing even faster, right? Especially with the ability to work from home, the ability to work remotely, and really the needs, right, that have arisen from the pandemic. And I think you're right. So two things, right? I think corporate organizations, big corporate businesses are starting to think about how can they operate in a more agile way in which like small businesses do, right? Or startups do. So we're starting to see a lot of big corporations break their teams or break their internal framework into smaller chunks of people, right? Smaller teams, smaller outcomes, so that they're able to have a lot more agility and flexibility. I think we're also seeing a lot of them invest in small businesses or invest in like startups, because they're looking for like innovation. They're looking for, new frameworks that they can adopt or they can absorb, they can acquire, right? So now more than ever, there's a lot of investment. And there's, I think there's investment in folks that are starting their own companies, but there's also a lot of investment in talent to build new things within a corporation, right? So entrepreneurship is actually now, I would say, even though it's not a bullet point on like on a job description, it is very much something that companies are looking for, right? What else are you bringing to the table aside from being able to do, the basic job description, right? Can you think outside the box? Can you be innovative? Can you be collaborative? Can you think about disrupting something, within the company that is going to make it faster? better, more accessible, more, mission driven. I think that's happening within big organizations. It's a good shift, and it's also, I mean, in my opinion, it's a good shift. It is a deathly shift for the companies that are not looking to change and that are not looking to be flexible in that sense, because less and less people are interested in working with them, right? Interested in working, at the companies. And I think that's starting to show. I think we're also going into, our Gen Z, right? Our next generation. Like, I'm a millennial, but Gen Zs are out in the workforce now, right? They've been graduating for a couple of years now. They're coming in with a lot of trends, a lot of likes, a lot of different preferences that are very different than, like, even myself, right, as a millennial. And I think, like, more than anything, when it comes to small businesses, or when it comes to starting companies, and even like the way in which we're going to see the spending power is, Gen Zs care about what companies stand for. Gen Zs care about, like, the new generation of money cares about, why are you doing what you're doing, right? So, like, you can be selling a cup on Etsy, right? You could be selling your personal branded cups, or you could be selling like stuff that you make with your Cricut on Etsy. But unless you have a really compelling story as to why I should buy that cup from you, they will go buy it from someone else, regardless of whether you have the best design, regardless of whether if you're the cheapest, the fastest shipping. Like, none of those things are, as important to them as it is like the story and the people behind, these businesses. So I think it's a really great opportunity to think about what are your values, what is your personal brand, what are the things you stand for, what are the things you care about, and embed all of those things as part of your business. And I talk about this at LEEAF all the time with our BIPOC women that we work with. It's really shifting out of that operational and transactional leadership into an inspirational leadership, right? And understanding that, like, it's time to harvest and harness talent. It's time to invest in your community. And it's community first, impact first, the money will follow. And we saw that during the pandemic. Those that
Now, I got a question on that with Gen Zs, because I don't, what you're saying is very interesting, and I think Gen Z is going to be some of our consumers. So, two questions on Gen Zs. These are different, opposite things, right? Well, not opposite, but different thoughts. One of them is, it seems to me that the Gen Zs also are more concerned about a work-life balance than even the millennials. The millennials were starting that, but I think Gen Zs are more work-life. And then that makes me ask the secondary question, Elianne, does that mean that, not crazy profit margins, I don't mean that, but Gen Zs are willing to pay for a handmade craft that would be a little bit more expensive than the corporation cookie cutter, so it allows a little bit more profit margin for those who are making things homemade or by hand or in small quantities?
Yeah, definitely. I think there is more appetite to purchase things from a company at a higher market value, if they know that extra revenue is going towards employee benefits, or it's going towards community impact, right? They're giving back to a certain organization. If it's a special line, right, towards XYZ, like, I think there is a lot of those components kind of embedded. I know I myself, have my roster of, like, if I'm going to spend $100 on a dinner, I know the places that I'm going to go to, right? And it's not going to be, my corporate places. It's going to be my higher end, smaller businesses that need that support. So I definitely think we're seeing that trend, and we're going to continue to see those numbers. And yeah, I mean, I think for us, we created, or we started this, like, work-life balance trend. I think Gen Z's just came in and they're like, we already have it, right? Like, we are living first and working second, as opposed to, those of us that were working first and then living second. Yeah. I also think it's a really great way to start the conversation of, like, how businesses are going to shift. I think for a long time, I'm sure you've seen it. Like, we work with small businesses that are like, it's great to be my own boss. It's great to have the flexibility. I love, having my own business, but I also work like 70 hours a week, right? I also work 80 hours a week. And so, you know, the question and the shift that I've made, at least this year, with all of my clients that I advise, it's, you know, I understand that sometimes you gotta work 78 hours a week. Like that's sometimes part of the grind. There's seasons, right? Maybe where there's more work than others. But the question that I really ask all the entrepreneurs I work with is this a sustainable lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Because at 70, 80 hours a week, without benefits, without, you know, a vacation fund, without a 401k, without, you know, time with your family, like you might as well go get a job. Might actually be more profitable for you, right? Your
Right.
opportunity cost is really giving. So I think it's always that question, and more than a question, it's a challenge for all the entrepreneurs that I work with, where, you know, I focus primarily in operational efficiency, and I work with them on breaking down barriers that stops them from being productive, or from, you know, from adopting like technology that will make them faster, better at certain things, right? Like stop sending 30 emails to like figure out what time you're going to meet on Zoom. Like, right? Send your Calendly. It's a lot faster, right? Like set up your Calendly, or set up your, you know, your automations and things like that. So, and again, it's just a transition, right? Of going from, you know, the way that we were doing things before to how we can embrace technology to make you more efficient so that you're not working 70, 80 hours a week.
Absolutely. Now, here's something that, and you, like I said, you're getting a more probably well-rounded view of what's happening than I am. So I'm going to tell you what I've noticed and what I've been talking about, and then you tell me where you see it in your world. I've been talking with a lot of the small businesses that have this automatic belief. I'm not saying it's never true, but an automatic belief that, okay, it's just me, I'm small. So what I need to do is I add a bunch of employees and I go through the growth. That actually, for a majority of companies, it's better to stay here than go all the way over here, because to try to be as profitable as you are here, you got to add all these people, add all this revenue, do all this just to get over here, be more tired, and make maybe even less than you did before. So that belief, like, you know, when I was growing up, you grow up, you go to college, you get married, you have 2 kids, you have the picket fence, you know, that natural progression. We got companies that are like, okay, I do this, then I got to add employees, then I got to grow. No, the ones that I'm seeing are that are making the most money, Elaine, have the most money and the most time, are those that are selling small quantities or selling their own personal skill. These service businesses, whatever that skill is, it could be consulting, it could be web design, it could even be making some things in small commercial kitchens, right? But these more solopreneurs are what I'm seeing as the most financially sound companies, but yet mainstream, if you will, thinks the solopreneur isn't a real company. I'm like, real companies can afford dinner. That's a real company. So comment on what you're seeing and thinking about that.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think what you're pointing out, or what I got from that was the way in which we're redefining success.
Yeah.
Right. Redefining success, and thinking about how do you structure your business, whether you're a solopreneur or, you know, a single founder, a single member LLC, to being a corporation, right? So what does that look like, right? I think thinking about, and a lot of this has to do with and again, we go a lot into the process of talking to our clients about working on their business and working in their business, right? So sure, you gotta, you know, jump on in the morning and open the door and be at the register. Yeah, like that makes sense, right? It's part of the work. But you also have to allocate time to be like, well, if I'm not working at the register, who else could be working at the register? And what would that actually cost, right? And going through the process of creating, you know, some projections and thinking about like, is this the direction in which I want my company to go to? A lot of the work that we do is meet folks where they're at, not just physically, like going to their actual physical businesses and bringing the resources to them and talking to them, but also meeting them where they're at in their goals, right? Like we've visited so many businesses. I can tell you in the last year, we've visited a lot of businesses in South and East LA that are legacy businesses, right? They're like, I've had this grocery store for 20 years. I've had this, you know, stand for 15 years, right? is what we consider legacy businesses. And their particular goals and success is, already met or has already been met or is like already passed, right? They're like, yeah, like I put my kids through college, right? And that was my goal. That was it. I wanted to make sure I had enough money to pay my rent, put my kids through college, and that's all I needed this business to give me. That to them is success, right? And there is no reason why, we need to go into those businesses and say, well, what if you franchise, or what if you expanded, or what if,
yeah.
oh, right? Like that's it. That's all they wanted to do. And now, I think we do, if we do, if anything, what we do with them is just talk to them about succession planning, right? And a lot of times that doesn't even mean passing it off to their kids, right? Like I said, I grew up in a restaurant and I worked in the restaurant. Like I worked the register, I worked behind the grill. I was a server for a little bit. I don't know that I ever had, the desire, nor did my parents have the desire to be like, yep, we're going to pass on this restaurant to you. And that I saw myself running a restaurant, right? But I think what was important is like, I learned how to work within the industry, within the field, the ins and outs, the challenges that my parents had is a lot of the things that I apply now when I work with restaurant owners. And what we're working towards, right? It's like, we passed it off to a cousin, or we passed it off to a manager that was like more interested in running, right? And kind of rising within that company. So yeah, just redefining success, redefining succession, right? Family businesses don't necessarily have to be the same blood family. They could be like the manager that was with you for 15 years, right? If you have a really, enthusiastic and objective, server who's like, yeah, like I want to become a manager and I want to eventually own this restaurant or this bakery or, whatever. I think that's important to kind of consider. And yeah, I think with the personal service, with the professional services, right, and having like single member organizations and companies, I think the pandemic was like a brutal shock of awareness of how many independent contractors and single member LLCs we have in the state of California, right? We are a service-based state. There are so many folks that have to operate that way due to the nature of their work, right? I think lawyers are all like single members, right? Accountants for so many different reasons. But we need to really, with them, yeah, they're starting to figure out like, what is their opportunity cost? How can they expand on those services? I can tell you that I myself, a lot of the things that I create or that I have built as a service organization are things that I actually have built like individually through my own company that I've piloted with like a client or two. And then I'm like, okay, if I take it into an organization, this is what it would look like to scale it, right? And I think that's also like, it's also really great to see. And we're starting to see also just a lot of folks that have really recognizable and marketable skill sets, right? So, I know, my brother, he studied communication and like has, a lot of experience with like social media and videos, right? And because he's like, deeply embedded in social media, right? He's like, he's from that generation. But he also just like cares about the trends and he keeps up with all of that work. While simultaneously is also an avid, athlete and runner. So if he wanted to, he could train someone on running, right? He could get paid to train folks to run a marathon because he has run a marathon before. He could train folks on how to, recover from certain injuries because he has recovered from certain injuries as an athlete himself, right? So this I think this multifaceted marketable skills phase is here for a lot of folks, and they're definitely just learning how to make money doing different things, right?
Yes, that's what I find real exciting. Now, going back to what you're saying about, people looking at like accountants and everything, I had a couple meetings this week with different people. One was a CPA. Instead of going out and starting the brick and mortar, she's like, I'm going to do a virtual. I'll have a virtual office if I ever need to meet somebody. I don't need to meet anybody. I'm just, people are structuring the businesses so different. And one of my big passions is I feel like if we all take back our power, have our own little entities, and we all switch between each other and sell to each other like in the the olden days, but sell things that are relevant to today, we really do have more control over our life. So that part really excites me. Now, going back to the discussion of selling, training on running or selling on an injury, I think that when you look at some of the platforms, let's go back to, even you said Etsy gig, and then we got Kajabi, and we got Emma in the audience here who sells videos and uses Kajabi and sells physical therapy, tennis elbow videos, etc. I think that some of these platforms that used to be just an added distribution for our product are coming into play and being the entire company themselves. I was amazed. I went on Etsy some time ago because I needed a custom made tabletop. And Etsy came up, and I thought, Etsy for a custom made tabletop? I hadn't been on Etsy in a long time, Elaine. There
Yeah.
were all these people with these cool crafts of any type of custom thing. And you give them the measurements, they answered through Etsy, they would build and ship it. I got the most beautiful industrial looking tabletop at a very good price, custom fit to the way I wanted. I was like, wow, Etsy, I'm not speaking just Etsy, I'm saying across the board, these are game changers now. So I think there's platforms that can be your entire company that didn't exist before. So you're real into the tech world. How is tech companies changing, as well as the tech world supporting the solopreneur, the small entrepreneur companies?
Yeah, it's definitely yeah, I think you're right about platforms having an entire life of their own, right? And becoming their entire income stream. I think TikTok is probably like the leading, platform to do that. I know there's folks that single-handedly make, a 6-figure income by being, influencers, by being like food critics, right? They have, 14, 15 million followers, and each of their individual posts, hits, millions of viewers, and automatically, like, they're able to make that kind of revenue, right, off of the platform. And I think yeah, like we're seeing that revolution. I mean, and also I would say with technology, what I've seen the biggest shift in the last 2 years, 3 years, is that it has become more and more accessible to both onboard to it, use it, and build it, right? So I think when I first started working in tech, it was like, oh, I gotta find someone to code my app. I gotta find an iOS developer. I gotta find an Android developer, because they're not the same thing and they have different capacities, and right. And it's like, oh, there was all these components. Right now, we're starting to see a lot more. Like less coding and more accessible, platforms to build, at the very least, prototypes that can be tested, that can be shared with us, with a small market to validate, to grow a potential customer base that you can take to an investor, and they can then, give you funding for it. Here in LA, I would say, I'm a proud vice chair for Pledge LA, which is the collective of all venture capital firms and tech companies in LA. We're starting to see a true commitment, and seeing the numbers shift in diversity and investments, right? So we're leading, I think, at like 28% of our, venture capital dollars are going to underrepresented companies, which means there is intentionality behind how, the funding is being distributed. And with that funding also comes a lot of support, because, not only are a lot of these groups giving out, checks, they're also providing, mentorship, and they're providing leadership, right? They're providing support. And we're starting to see a lot more accelerators and incubators from other parts of the world be really interested in supporting the talent here in LA, right? So, to your point of how are they supporting like individual founders or like single founders, right? Solo founders. Again, I'm seeing a growth in like fractional team members and like companies that offer fractional team members. So you can still be a solo founder and have a fractional CFO that helps you with all your financials, right? Or you can have a fractional, CTO, you can have a fractional CMO, right? Doing your marketing strategy. But yeah, there's also, I mean, and across the board too, like from a national perspective, we're seeing the federal government put dollars into innovation hubs, right? I think we have 2 innovation hubs here in Southern California. We have one, I think it's in Long Beach, and the other one out in Ventura County. We're seeing a lot more labs kind of pop up, right? We used to only have the LA Clean Tech Incubator, but now we also have, one at Cal State LA. We have a couple more brewing in Long Beach. So yeah, I think we're seeing a lot of different support systems. I would say the biggest challenge that we have is that the information and access to possibilities is not yet wide distributed at the bottom, right? So if you happen to bump into someone that like knows about tech, then you'll end up like eventually, in the tech ecosystem, but it is still not highly advertised or presented to our community colleges, to our, public universities, to our, most dire high schools, right? It's only like, magnet high schools and a little bit farther or more advanced neighborhoods that have, like a coding class in their high school. So I think we have a long way to go in terms of providing at least an equitable onboarding platform for all of our high schools, right? Especially those in our most underserved neighborhoods, as well as community colleges and public universities. And I'm excited. I mean, part of the work that I do, like you said, part of the advocacy groups is advocating for funding to be, directly allocated to a lot of these institutions to provide that access, right? To start with, maybe a panel, right, of just folks that are in tech that came from, a community college, or, folks that are from your same neighborhood that went to your high school and are now working in tech, so that you can see the pathway to becoming, a tech entrepreneur or a solo founder. But I think we're getting there. There's definitely a lot of work that we're doing, and there's so much more work to do. I personally work with a lot of folks,
Is there any tech that is leading? Like at one time first, it was all about programs or all about software or all about this or all about what. Are you seeing any kind, because tech's so big, is there any kind of tech that you're seeing a preference by these institutions, the investors, or that people are typically inventing more?
Yeah, I think 2 things that I'm seeing a lot of is SaaS platforms for small businesses. So interestingly enough, and we know small business is a big market share, right? Folks that have traditional small businesses, they need service as a software as a service platforms, right? That's what SaaS is. They need things like Square. They need things like, the Venmos, the Zells of the world, like all of those kind of platforms are really booming. I think we're seeing one of the latest investments here in LA was into a platform that helps with accounting and financials, right? And the other thing that I'm seeing by institutions that they're kind of investing or seeing like a high growth is artificial intelligence. Right? Yeah. So we saw it was interesting because I was following, ChatGPT before like anyone else was, kind of leading into it. And then we just saw like a uptick, right? And now we're starting to see companies that are building off of AI. So I just recently saw, a platform that builds websites, right? So you don't no longer have to like build a website. You can just give a prompt to their, artificial intelligence, give it some cues, give it some context, give it some content like pictures and things like that, and boom, you have a website. And I'm thinking that's cool because I hate building websites and they're so intricate, and to just do it in about 15 minutes sounds very good to me. And I'm thinking about all the small businesses, right, that we can help with building websites in an easier way, so they have a digital footprint. So yeah, I would say those are the top 2 things that I've seen so far.
Now, here's something I was thinking about the other day. It's something I haven't heard much about. The 3D printer was the hottest item, and it was supposed to at least help with prototypes. Has the 3D printer died? Is it out there still? Is it coming about? What's happening in that world? Are you familiar with anything?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of physical things that are still being produced, especially in biotech. So here in LA, all the way out to San Diego, and San Diego is kind of the hub for biotech. we're seeing a lot of medical devices being, printed and kind of tested. That's where mostly I see a lot of that infrastructure being used. But yeah, I mean, they're out there. It's definitely much cheaper. Like I remember we had access to a printer when we were at CalCit LA through one of our partners. But man, like even just the cost of the materials, it was like, this is cool. I can print something, but it's going to still cost me like $40-50, right? $100 to bring in materials versus now it's like significantly cheaper and more accessible. So, and they're kind of everywhere, right? I think the LA Public Library has a 3D printer. You can go in there and just use it, right? So you just have to figure out like what you want to actually print.
One of the positive things I seen with it is where they would have to take a prototype, send it over to China, to do a mold injection, a 30,000, they could create a prototype. They could then have something in their hands to speak to investors and what have you. Now, when it comes to products, and then the next one before we end, we're going to get into some of the financing question, but when it comes to products, new products that are becoming very popular. Now, once again, I've got the limited exposure, so I'm going to tell you what I am noticing, and you tell me if you think this is any validity. I am noticing that in the olden days, and I'm old, in the olden days, people made, I don't know what to call them, like knickknacks or tchotchkes, those cheap things that you bought. They didn't really do anything, right? And you buy them all at dollar stores and stuff like that. It seems to me that, and I always wasn't into those things. They always ended up in the trash anyway, but I don't see as much of that. I feel like that I used to see in my life. I feel like everything has a use. The products that are coming out is maybe a cool chair that folds and is able to be taken to the beach easily. It seems like there's a utility to our products, or there is a craft to the artwork, but there's not a bunch of cheap junk being made as much. Or maybe that's because I desire not to have a bunch of cheap junk made. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely based on a lot of the preferences and movement towards like sustainability. I mean, there is a lot more awareness around, do I just want to have, do I just want to buy stuff that's just going to clutter my house that doesn't usually have like more than one use? I mean, we're seeing a lot more, multi-use items, right? Like I remember like I thought I was like one of the cool people coming to work with like my, multi-use like silverware, like bamboo silverware.
Oh yeah.
But now it's like you actually kind of get people actually look at you a little weird if you're like coming, like eating with the plastic fork, right? Or like a plastic spoon. I think that has a component to it, right? Just people are more aware of like the planet and sustainability. So it's like, let's not create stuff that's just going to end up in waste in waste fields. But I also think there's a component to like the preferences have changed of like, I'm not just going to buy things just to buy them, right? The value of a dollar really has to come with the utility of it. And so even things like, apps and technology, right? That doesn't necessarily take up physical space. Like I don't have any random apps on my phone that I don't use on a daily basis. Like anything that doesn't get used at least once a week just doesn't live in my phone. I just delete it, right? Like it has to have and it's like, it doesn't cost me anything and it doesn't take up any space. And it's not like if I'm, if I have an extra app, my phone's a little heavier. Like that's not
right.
We're just, I think it's a mindset, right? Of like things have to have purpose and use. Like I said earlier, with businesses, we're starting to follow them because they have a purpose, because they have a story behind it. So I think that's just all tied into that shift of how we're purchasing, right? Or purchasing habits have changed and will continue to shift.
It really is. I mean, we're coming full circle, and I love this conversation because it's also helping the entrepreneurs in the audience to know what is wanted out there. What is the demand about? What do the products have to do? And I agree with you on the multi-use. We used to call it a spork when we did backpacking because you only had one, a spork. And I would get done backpacking and I have everything that I needed in that little pack on my back. And then I'd be, why do I need all this stuff? And everybody that knows me really well know I live in a very small mobile space. So if it doesn't have many uses. So I want to just speak a little bit about what funding and the differences in funding. And I'll tell you what, once again, I'm noticing, I feel as though there's a wider gap between really funding just a little bit on the credit card, not even really having to borrow much, like a service oriented, or you just start really small, or you have a brick and mortar restaurant, so you're borrowing against the restaurant. You're not just borrowing for marketing and people and all that. You're really borrowing to buy a piece of equipment of some sort. And then the big funding is way over here. And I think the majority of the brand new companies are not really going after or getting a ton of funding to get started. They're kind of self-perpetuating along the way. And the ones that are getting funded are bigger companies with big investors, etc. And I also see that the banks are doing less of the funding as well, especially since the pandemic. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the way in which companies are funded and or are starting has definitely shifted. I would attribute a little bit to the pandemic in terms of just, people being cautious about how they take up debt or funding. The other big trend or kind of booming platforms that I've seen really resonating with businesses is crowdfunding, right? Yep. Like I've invested in several companies. I think like platforms like WeFunder, right, or like iFund that allows regular folks like me, right, like non-accredited investors with $500 to like put it into a company, right, have really shifted the pace in which folks want to access some of that capital and how they leverage their community. I think we're also seeing a shift in terms of who is starting businesses. So I think part of it is, in the past, we've had a very specific demographic starting businesses that had the relationships, that had the network to go out after a loan with very little credit, right? Because they had the network, they had the background. And I think with what we're seeing with the newer the new wave of entrepreneurs is we have our communities, we have, our families. We're starting to come from also, we're coming from like wealthier backgrounds, right? Or like where the folks that are starting companies are quitting their six-figure jobs and had been saving for, 5-6 years. And so they have that capital to kind of get started, as opposed to someone giving it to us, right? Or as opposed to us going to a bank to get the lending part out of it. And yeah, we're being more intentional with borrowing. I agree with you. I think we're seeing a lot of customers and a lot of clients just go through funding opportunities for very specific things like buying a building or buying a van or buying, the $3,000 espresso machine, right? Like very, very intentional with, and which I think is good. It's good to be intentional borrowing money. I think they're planning a little bit better. And I also think they have a better understanding and plan to repay some of that debt, right? So I think I'm starting to see a lot more folks who are like, cool, I'll borrow that money. Like I'm okay with that debt, taking on that debt, knowing that this is how much money it's going to bring me, how much revenue I'm going to make off of the money I'm going to borrow, and how long it's going to take me to pay it off, right? As opposed to just walking out with the funding. So I think that's a testament to all the work that we're doing, to train and educate folks.
I agree. I don't think people are saying, well, let me just get an idea, borrow some money on equity in my house, throw it out there and see what works. And you made me think of something else worth mentioning, that you're right. I'm seeing a lot of older people starting companies. So it's not just the young Gen X or the young millennials. I'm seeing a lot of people that had been, especially since the pandemic, one of the common calls I have at the SBDC is, after the pandemic, I quit my job. I've been at it 30 years. I've always wanted to start this company. I'm in my 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, I'm starting my company now. And so that's where I feel it's so wonderful, because I think that, once again, taking the power back, I remember when I was younger and went my own way, I would see people who then got, can I just say, pigeon-toed into a corporation. Their 401 was set up there, their medical was set there, and they were miserable going to work every single day. And they felt trapped in it. And I just never felt like being alive should be trapped. I never thought that that was a good thing. And
Right.
so that's what I really like, is that it's really created something new. This has been a fascinating conversation. We have gone all around and came back again. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there, but you have to look at it with new eyes. You have to pretty much say, take your eyes, close them from the pandemic with no emotions about pandemic, good, bad, ugly, and different. I'm not saying that, but open them and go, who is out there now? What are they wanting to buy? What are they needing? How can I form the company? Do I really need to borrow money? Can I be a solopreneur? Can I use a platform like Etsy and create a whole company and income with just selling stuff on Etsy or Kajabi or something like that? I think there's a brand new playing field out there, and it's going to be more about one-on-one individuals, small companies doing business together and collectively finding their strength. That's my ending statement today. Elaine, last words for our audience.
Don't forget to ask for help.
Oh, good.
Ask for help twice as many times as you're willing to give out a hand. And don't forget that there's a lot of resources and folks that are just, here to help and to support the process. So reach out.
Speaking of which, we got to make sure your information's in the chat. Lauren, I'm going to bring you back on. Make sure Elaine's got her information in the chat so people know how to reach out to her. Perfect. Now, wasn't that fascinating, Lauren? Don't you feel like we just went all around and back again and had a whole bunch of stuff we discussed?
You know what though? Like I was able to follow the flow, like it flowed effortlessly. So kudos to you both. Elaine, it's always amazing having you. I mean, such a wealth of knowledge.
I know she's out there making it happen. That's why I figured if there was anybody that could just say, what's going on out there? I feel like something's changed. Has something changed? Elaine was, and sorry about turning the camera off. I was trying, one of my lights went out and I was, trying not to startle you there, Lauren. I know you were like, where's Lauren? In fact, I got to replace this camera. I had the weirdest thing talking about tech. I was teaching on a webinar the other day and I went like this with my hand. And for some reason in the background, all these balloons came out. I was like, look, I got magic. And I've been trying to do it ever since. How do I make the balloons come? That was pretty cool. So yeah, I think my camera is, speaking of tech, I think I need to buy a new camera. But anyway, Elaine, thank you so much. I love your smiley face, your ambition, your influence in the communities and what you're doing for all the entrepreneurs. You're just happening. I don't know how else to say it. You're just happening.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'm an LA SBDC advisor. So I think Lauren told you guys how to get a hold of us through the link. You can find us, we work for the network. So just make an appointment with us. We can chat about your business. We can help with different things. So thank you so much for having me.
You're through Pasadena. We should do a shout out to Pasadena SBDC. So if Annie's listening right now, I'm not sure if you're there, Annie, put in some information about how they can get in touch with you. That way, there's Annie. Annie, put in your contact information to contact the Pasadena SBDC to get in touch with Elaine and a couple other guests that are coming on. We're going to have a whole bunch of guests coming on talking about different things. So awesome. Annie, let everybody know. Well, we're going to have you come back on again because you're part of the regular now. I just have to, about every 2 or 3 months, I go, oh my God, I need Elaine back on, find out what's happening in the world. So it's always great to have you here. So thank you everybody for being on the show today and coming and seeing another Small Biz Talk with your host, Lori Williams. Thank you for the frequent flyers and anybody new to the show. We'll see you next week. And Lauren, as always, thank you for making sure everything works. And Elaine, I probably won't see you before the holiday. You have a good holiday and I will come back around with you again.
All right. Awesome. Thanks, Lori. Thanks, Lauren. Have a good holiday.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. All right, everyone. Oh, hey, April. Good to see you. Annie, thank you so much for putting that contact information into the chat. Super appreciate that. If you guys want to get in contact with Elaine or with Lori, please shoot us an email. You can either email myself, lsimpson@lbcc.edu, and if you scroll up the chat, you'll be able to see my information there. And then Annie has also inserted her information, so sbdc@pasadena.edu, in order to schedule a one-on-one with Elaine. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it. Be sure to check in with us next week. Let's see. So next week, we will have a show at 10 a.m. per usual. And then the following week on the 22nd, we will be dark. But we will be returning the following Wednesday on the 29th. So we'll see you then. All right, everyone. Take care. Thank you for joining us. Bye.